How does the world end? Does it start with a king, a flag, or a border? Sometimes all it takes is a single push. In the summer of 1914, a single spark would set the entire world on fire. This is the story of 37 days that created a catastrophe. The spark. How World War I began. June 28, 1914. A hot, tense summer day in Sarajevo, a city in the volatile heart of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. It was about to host a royal visitor, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the throne of the empire. A man of stern reputation whose political ideas were a threat to nationalists across the region. With him was his beloved wife, Sophie. Theirs was a rare royal love match, but their journey today would place them directly in the crosshairs of history. The royal motorcade began its procession along a pre-announced route. But hidden within the cheering crowds, a deadly conspiracy was waiting. A team of young, fanatical Serbian nationalists, armed with bombs and pistols, were ready to strike a fatal blow against the empire they despised. They were barely men, consumed by a revolutionary fervor, positioned along the route, each with a chance to change the world. But as the Archduke's car passed the first assassin, he was paralyzed by fear. He froze, unable to act. The motorcade drove on. Further down the road, another conspirator, Nedeljko Vabranovia, was more resolute. He armed his bomb and hurled it directly at the royal car. In a remarkable display of cool-headedness, the Archduke, a trained soldier, saw the object flying towards him and deflected it with his arm. The bomb bounced off the car and exploded beneath the vehicle behind them, spewing shrapnel and smoke. The street erupted into chaos and screaming. The assassination attempt had failed, or so it seemed. The Archduke, unharmed but furious, was sped away from the scene of the attack. His would-be killer, Vabranovia, swallowed a faulty cyanide pill and was captured by the police almost immediately. One assassin was in custody. The conspiracy seemed to be unraveling. Arriving at the town hall, the Archduke's rage was immense. "I come here as your guest," he roared at the mayor, "and you greet me with bombs." But then, against all advice from his security, Franz Ferdinand made a fateful and noble decision. He insisted on visiting the officers wounded in the bombing at the hospital. At that exact moment, another of the assassins, a 19-year-old named Gavrilo Princip, had given up all hope, believing the plot had failed completely. Dejected, he walked to a food shop on a side street, his role in history seemingly over before it had even begun. But history is driven by chance. In the confusion, the Archduke's driver, unfamiliar with the new route to the hospital, made a wrong turn. He drove directly down the very side street where Princip was standing. And then, realizing his mistake, the car's engine stalled as he tried to reverse. For one unbelievable, world-altering moment, fate held its breath. The target had been delivered, stationary, less than 5 feet away from the one assassin who was still armed and free. Gavrilo Princip could not believe his luck. He saw his chance. He stepped forward, drew his pistol, and took aim. 2 shots rang out. The first for the Archduke. The second, meant for a military governor, for his wife, Sophie. On a street corner in Sarajevo, a series of improbable chances and a single act of terrorism did more than just kill 2 people. It lit the fuse for a global catastrophe. In Sarajevo, the conspiracy was over. The young assassin, Gavrilo Princip, was in custody, his defiant, world-changing act complete. But the news of the assassination was just beginning its journey. traveling by wire to the great capitals of Europa, single spark, seeking dry tinder. In Vienna, the capital of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the news was met with public grief. But behind the palace doors, the powerful war party saw a golden opportunity. The murder of his heir gave the elderly emperor, Franz Joseph, the perfect pretext to solve the problem that had long plagued his empire: the rising tide of Serbian nationalism. His top generals had argued for years for a swift, punitive war to crush Serbia once and for all. Now, finally, they had their excuse. But the Austro-Hungarian Empire was too weak to act alone. Before it could move, it needed the full and unconditional backing of its powerful ally, Germany. The German Kaiser, Wilhelm II, a man known for his arrogance and impulsive nature, saw a chance for Germany to assert its dominance on the world stage. He gave Austria-Hungary what historians now call the blank check, a catastrophic promise of unconditional support for any action they chose to take against Serbia. Emboldened by Germany's promise, Vienna drafted an ultimatum, a list of 10 humiliating demands deliberately designed to be so harsh that no sovereign nation could possibly accept them. The most inflammatory demand insisted that Austrian officials be allowed to lead the investigation on Serbian soil, a direct violation of Serbia's independence. The Serbian government received the ultimatum with a 48-hour deadline. They were stunned. It was, as one politician called it, the end of us. Knowing that refusal meant a hopeless war with a great empire. But that acceptance meant the end of their independence. Serbia was caught in an impossible trap. In a masterful display of diplomacy, the Serbians sent back a reply that accepted 9 of the 10 demands, a near-total capitulation designed to appease Vienna. But Austria-Hungary did not want peace. They wanted war. They immediately declared the reply unsatisfactory and severed all diplomatic ties. On July 28, 1914, exactly 1 month after the assassination, the Austro-Hungarian Empire officially declared war on the small nation of Serbia. The first shots of the Great War were fired, not in a grand battle, but as Austrian artillery began shelling the Serbian capital, Belgrade, from across a river. The news of the attack on a fellow Slavic nation sent shockwaves through St. Petersburg, the capital of the vast and powerful Russian Empire. Tsar Nicholas II, a gentle family man who hated conflict, found himself trapped by a complex web of alliances and a sense of imperial duty. His generals insisted that Russia, as the great protector of the Slavic peoples, could not stand by and watch Serbia be destroyed by a rival empire. To abandon Serbia would be a global humiliation. The gears of the great European alliances designed to keep the peace now began to grind inexorably towards war. Reluctantly and tragically, the Tsar gave the order he had desperately hoped to avoid. The command went out across all 11 time zones of his empire. Mobilize. The Russian army was to prepare for war. In an instant, millions of men, from farmers in the countryside to workers in the cities, were called to arms. The Russian steamroller, a force of over 5 million soldiers, the largest army in the world, slowly began to gather its immense strength. And in Berlin, the German Kaiser received the news he had not anticipated. Russia was mobilizing. The regional conflict he had recklessly encouraged was about to become a continental catastrophe. The second domino had fallen. With Russia mobilizing in the east, the German military snapped into action. Their entire strategy for a two-front war rested on a single, rigid document: the Schlieffen Plan. The plan was a massive gamble. It demanded that Germany invade France first, swinging a powerful army through neutral Belgium to achieve a swift victory in just 6 weeks before Russia could fully mobilize. The German generals informed the Kaiser that their complex mobilization timetables, once started, were irreversible. The military plan now had more power than the politicians. Germany issued a blunt ultimatum to Russia: cease all military preparations immediately. It was a demand they knew would be refused. They sent another to France, demanding it abandon its alliance with Russia and pledge neutrality. It was another demand designed to be rejected. Bound by treaty and national honor, France defiantly refused. The system of alliances meant to prevent war was now making it inevitable. On August 1, 1914, Germany officially declared war on Russia. The crisis had now engulfed Eastern Europe. 2 days later, as required by the Schlieffen Plan, Germany declared war on France. The dominoes were now falling with terrifying speed. Across Germany, a wave of patriotic euphoria swept the nation as millions of men were called to arms, convinced they were fighting a defensive war. The great German war machine began its march west. The Schlieffen Plan was in motion. But to get to France, the German army had to first go through here, the small, peaceful, and officially neutral nation of Belgium. Germany demanded free passage for its armies, expecting the small nation to simply step aside and surrender its sovereignty. But Belgium's king, Albert I, made a decision of immense moral and physical courage. Knowing they could not win, but refusing to sacrifice their honor, the Belgians refused the German demand. They would fight. And so, on August 4th, the German army poured across the Belgian border, violating a treaty that had guaranteed its neutrality for over 70 years. The news of the invasion of neutral Belgium sent a profound shockwave through London. The final great power, Great Britain, now had to make its choice. The British cabinet was deeply divided. Many argued that this was a continental squabble, and not Britain's war to fight. As evening fell, the British Foreign Secretary, Sir Edward Grey, looked out at the gas lamps being lit, and famously remarked, "The lamps are going out all over Europe. We shall not see them lit again in our lifetime." But the brutal invasion of brave little Belgium, a small country Britain was sworn by an old treaty to protect, tipped the balance in favor of war. Britain issued its own ultimatum to Germany: withdraw all troops from Belgium by midnight, or a state of war would exist between them. In Berlin, the German chancellor was incredulous, unable to believe that Great Britain would go to war over this. He famously dismissed the 75-year-old treaty protecting Belgium as nothing more than a scrap of paper. In London, the world watched the clock tick towards the midnight deadline. The last chance for peace was slipping away. The deadline passed without a reply. Great Britain was now at war with Germany. The final domino had fallen. And so, in the summer of 1914, the young men of Europe marched off to a war they believed would be a glorious adventure over by Christmas. It would instead become the greatest catastrophe the world had ever known. In the summer of 1914, the young men of Europe marched off to a war they believed would be a glorious adventure, a test of national pride. They were promised glory and that they would be home by Christmas. They were wrong. They had marched into a 4-year nightmare of mud, blood, and unimaginable suffering. The age of heroic cavalry charges and noble combat was dead. The new reality of the 20th century was the trench, the machine gun, and the barbed wire. It was a new kind of industrial slaughter, where men were cut down in waves by machines they could not see. A war not of men against men, but of men against steel and high explosives. A war that would consume an entire generation. Before it was over, more than 20 million people would be dead. An entire generation lost to the fields of Europe, a testament to the failure of its leaders. The war did not just kill men, it killed the old world. The great empires of Austria-Hungary, Russia, and Germany, the very powers that started the war, were all shattered by it. In a final tragic irony, the Great War was, in many ways, a family feud that got out of control. The leaders of Britain, Germany, and Russia were all cousins who ultimately led their own houses to ruin, and today, the world they destroyed is gone. But the street corner in Sarajevo remains, a quiet witness to the moment the world went mad. Was it all the result of one 19-year-old's desperate act? Or was Europe a powder keg, simply waiting for any spark, any excuse to explode? The question remains, But what is certain is that in 37 short days, a single spark of violence, fanned by pride, fear, and a web of fatal alliances was enough to set the entire world on fire.